So absolutely inescapable at MWC this year that on-device AI is the theme. Pretty much any direction you turn, AI is the theme, and that's good and bad. In one sense, there's a lot of hype, and there is a very real risk that a lot of what we're hearing creates AI fatigue. There's very little substance into some of the ways in which OEMs and others in the ecosystem are talking about AI. On the other hand, there is a huge opportunity for AI. If you think where we were 12 months ago, and we started to get the first models being shown running on device, Stable Diffusion for example, the market has exploded since then, and the quality of what's actually running on that hardware has transformed. So real momentum and a real opportunity there, but there needs to be a tempering of some of that enthusiasm. I think some of the most exciting announcements here have got to be actually enabling AI in terms of the user experience on the hardware. So what I mean by that is, we've been in kind of build mode for the last 12 months. There's been a lot of developments in the silicon to be able to run models, large language models on device, but we haven't actually started to see real end user applications coming through yet. Now, what we're seeing from the likes of Qualcomm, for example, their announcement of AI Hub, is integrating and optimizing a huge range of models, like 70+ models, that's going to enable developers to really build experiences that differentiate and create that long tail of applications. So obviously when it comes to AI and on-device AI in particular, there's going to be some pretty big requirements and big new requirements of the hardware. One of those has been a big theme of the show, and we've seen it over the last 12 months in terms of the implementation and integration of the NPU into the hardware. But obviously there's going to be other requirements there as well. These models are substantial, 2 billion, 4 billion, 6 billion parameters. It is going to require a huge amount of memory, and that memory's got to be high bandwidth, and it's got to be extremely low latency, in addition to the fact that it's got to be extremely high capacity. So it's changing the nature of the market because, in essence, if we think about smartphones over the last 12 years perhaps, an area where the OEMs would always try to reduce cost has been memory, and RAM in particular, and that stands to change significantly when it comes to AI. I think the opportunity when it comes to the edge, when it's talking about memory specifically, is this fact that we are going to need a huge amount of capacity. It's going to have to be extremely high bandwidth, and it's going to have to be low latency. And it's going to drive a demand of memory that we just haven't seen before. The fact of the matter is, until now, memory has always been outperforming the actual requirement in the handset. That's going to change significantly. The use cases from AI means that AI is really going to be pushing memory providers to provide really highly optimized solutions that can speak to the workloads that are going to be running on device. I think one thing that's perhaps important to touch on is where we are in terms of that AI cycle, because whilst there's a huge amount of hype at this show and more broadly, there is a reality that for the most part, we haven't really seen AI implemented into the apps that we use on a day-to-day basis. I think once we start to see generative AI capability in the likes of Instagram, in the likes of TikTok, that's where it starts to have real meaning for the consumer, and that's when it starts to really create demand pull. Because obviously the hope here is, particularly from a device manufacturer perspective, is that you really start to generate demand and it forces replacements, because replacements have been lengthening 3-4 years and beyond. So the hope is that this will change, but we need to actually get the experiences in consumers' hands rather than just talking about AI as a concept, because AI ultimately for a consumer is meaningless. Micron and Micron's role when it comes to enabling everything that's going to be happening in AI I think is going to be extremely important. Obviously, there's the memory requirement, and we've talked about that and how important that's going to be. But I think what's going to be particularly critical here is that there's far, far closer cooperation with the OEMs, with others in the ecosystem, with application developers. So the memory requirement and the roadmap in terms of R&D development for memory is far more tightly aligned to the end use cases. So memory can be really tightly optimized for the workloads that are going to be running on devices. That's not something that we've seen to that extent before in the smartphone industry.